Jacob Tate sat in his office, running a hand through his graying hair as he stared at the latest customer complaints. One caught his attention immediately. I was turned away because I didn't look rich enough to shop there. Never been so humiliated in my life. His stomach tightened. Jacob had bought the jewelry company a decade ago, expanding it to 10 stores across the state. He had always prided himself on selling quality pieces at fair prices, whether a customer was buying a $1,000 necklace or a simple silver ring. But now, it seemed his employees had forgotten that. Frustrated, he called his district manager, Laura. "This isn't the first complaint like this," Jacob said. "What's going on in that store?" Laura hesitated. "I've spoken to the manager, Kevin. He insists everything is fine, says customers exaggerate." Jacob exhaled sharply. He was tired of second-hand reports. "I want to see for myself." Laura sounded unsure. "You mean an inspection?" "No," Jacob said. "I mean going in undercover." Laura was silent for a beat. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Jacob had never personally met most of the employees. They only knew him as a name on emails or in corporate memos. He wasn't the type to plaster his face all over the company's website or show up for unnecessary meetings. Besides, the staff at this particular store had been hired after he bought the business. Within days, he had transformed his appearance. He trimmed his beard differently, swapped his usual tailored suits for a worn-out jacket, and wore an old watch instead of his usual Rolex. He even put on a pair of fake glasses. To them, he'd just be another customer. Walking into the store, Jacob immediately noticed the atmosphere. The glass cases sparkled under bright lights, showcasing expensive necklaces and diamond rings. But something felt cold. Employees barely acknowledged customers unless they looked wealthy. Then he saw her. An older woman in a faded brown coat entered, clutching her purse tightly. She hesitated near the engagement rings, her fingers grazing the glass. A sales associate, a young man with slicked back hair and an expensive-looking watch, approached, but his expression hardened the moment he looked her up and down. "Can I help you?" he asked, sounding anything but welcoming. The woman gave a small smile. "Yes, I'd like to see that ring, please." She pointed at a modest gold band. The salesman barely glanced at it. "That one starts at $500. "I understand," she said kindly. "I just want to see it." He sighed, then shook his head. "Look, ma'am, we have plenty of affordable options online. Maybe check there." The woman's face fell. "I'd prefer to see it in person." Jacob's jaw tightened as the salesman crossed his arms. "This store isn't really. For browsing, we cater to serious buyers." The woman swallowed, clearly embarrassed. "I am a serious buyer." The salesman gave a tight-lipped smile. "I'm just trying to save you some time. We have financing options, but—" "That's enough," Jacob cut in, his voice sharp. The salesman turned, looking him up and down. "And you are?" Jacob ignored the question and turned to the woman. "Ma'am, you have every right to shop here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. The salesman scoffed. "Look, buddy, she's not buying. No point wasting time." Jacob felt his anger rise, but he kept his voice level. "Go get the ring." The salesman narrowed his eyes. "Who do you think you are?" Jacob held his stare. "Someone who believes customers deserve respect." A tense silence filled the store. Other employees had noticed, watching from behind the counters. The salesman huffed but finally turned to unlock the case. He placed the ring on the counter with a forced smile. "There, happy." The woman picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jacob nodded. "Take your time deciding." The salesman shot him a glare, but didn't argue. Jacob clenched his fists at his sides. He had seen enough. This wasn't just bad service, this was an attitude problem, and it was happening under his roof. He wasn't leaving until he fixed it. Jacob stood near the display case, watching the older woman turn the ring over in her fingers. Her hands were slightly weathered, her nails neatly trimmed but unpolished. She set the ring down gently, as if afraid to disturb it. "I'll take it," she said softly. The salesman's eyebrows lifted just slightly, but he quickly masked his surprise. He reached for the ring and started ringing it up without another word. Jacob stayed where he was, observing. The woman pulled out a neatly folded envelope from her purse and counted out crisp bills. Cash. No financing, no hesitation. The salesman took the money without a hint of warmth. He bagged the ring, handed it over, and muttered a flat "thank you" before turning away. No congratulations, no appreciation, nothing. As the woman tucked the small bag into her purse and walked out, Jacob exhaled slowly. This wasn't just one bad employee. This was a culture problem. He turned his attention back to the rest of the store. A young couple stood near the engagement rings, hesitating as they whispered to each other. They were dressed casually: jeans, sneakers, nothing flashy. They looked uncertain, like they weren't sure if they even belonged there. A different salesperson, a woman with sleek blonde hair, approached them. Jacob moved closer, listening. "Looking for an engagement ring?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. The young man nodded. "Yes, we are." The saleswoman's eyes flicked over them quickly. "What's your budget?" The couple exchanged glances. The young woman hesitated before saying, "Maybe around 2,000. The saleswoman gave a tight-lipped smile. "We have a few options in that range, but most of our premium rings start higher. Have you considered waiting a little longer to save up?" Jacob's jaw tightened. The young woman's shoulders dropped slightly. "We were hoping to find something today." The saleswoman gestured toward a small section of rings, her tone making it clear she didn't expect them to buy. "These are our lower-tier options." Lower tier. Jacob studied the couple's faces. The young man's brow furrowed, and the woman bit her lip. They were clearly uncomfortable. Jacob had seen enough. He walked over, his presence drawing the saleswoman's attention. She glanced at him, then dismissed him just as quickly, assuming he was another unimportant customer. "Would you mind showing them something in white gold?" Jacob asked. The saleswoman blinked at him. "Like I said, their budget is a little low for." Jacob cut her off, his voice firm. "Show them something in white gold." She hesitated, then reluctantly unlocked a different section of the case. She pulled out a modest but beautifully crafted ring, a princess-cut diamond set in white gold. The young woman's eyes lit up. "That's gorgeous." The young man swallowed. "How much is it?" The saleswoman hesitated. 3,000. Jacob turned to them. "It's a solid investment. A ring like this will last a lifetime." The young man exhaled, thinking, then he nodded. "We'll take it." The saleswoman looked surprised but quickly masked it, pulling the ring back to prepare the sale. As she stepped away, Jacob turned to the couple. "Congratulations." The young woman beamed. "Thank you. We were worried we wouldn't be able to afford anything nice." Jacob nodded. Everyone deserves good service, no matter their budget. The young man shook his head slightly. "I was starting to think we weren't welcome here." Jacob's stomach twisted. He watched as they finalized their purchase, then turned his attention back to the store. A pattern was emerging. The employees weren't rejecting customers outright, but they were subtly discouraging anyone who didn't fit a certain image. Jacob moved toward the back of the store, where a group of employees gathered near the stockroom, chatting. They hadn't noticed him yet. One of them, a tall man with neatly pressed sleeves, laughed. "Did you see that old lady earlier? I thought she was lost." Another employee, a younger woman, smirked. "I was sure she'd walk out empty-handed." Jacob's pulse pounded in his ears. The first employee shrugged. Kevin's got the right idea. Focus on the real buyers. Cuts down on wasted time. Kevin, the store manager. Jacob had heard enough. He stepped forward, making his presence known. The employees straightened slightly, their casual conversation halting. Jacob's voice was level but firm. "I'd like to speak to Kevin." The tall man frowned. "Who are you?" Jacob held his stare. "Someone who needs to have a conversation with your manager." The other employees exchanged glances, then one of them disappeared into the back. Moments later, a man in his early 40s emerged. He had sharp features, a confident stride, and an expensive-looking watch. He glanced at Jacob, clearly unimpressed. "I'm Kevin, what's the issue?" Jacob studied him, his expression unreadable. "Let's talk." Kevin sized Jacob up, his expression neutral but guarded. "What can I help you with?" Jacob didn't answer right away. He let a pause settle between them, giving Kevin the chance to feel the weight of the moment. The store manager's confidence didn't waver, but his eyes flicked toward the other employees, as if gauging the situation. "You run this store?" Jacob asked. Kevin nodded. "That's right." Jacob gestured subtly toward the showroom floor. "Then you can explain why certain customers are treated differently based on how much money they look like they have." Kevin's brow creased slightly. "I don't know what you mean." Jacob's voice remained steady. "I watched one of your employees refuse to let a paying customer see a ring until I stepped in. Also saw another couple nearly walk out because they were made to feel like their budget wasn't worth your time." Kevin exhaled through his nose, his expression carefully measured. "We have a high-end clientele. Our time is best spent focusing on serious buyers." Jacob held his gaze. A woman walked in with cash in hand, ready to buy. Your employee dismissed her without even showing her the product. Kevin's mouth twitched as if he wanted to argue, but instead, he shifted his stance. If she really wanted to buy, she would have insisted. Jacob's eyes darkened. Customers shouldn't have to beg for basic respect. Kevin folded his arms. "Train my team to prioritize efficiency. If we spend too much time on browsers, we lose out on real sales." Jacob's patience thinned. "Do you think an insulted customer comes back?" Kevin hesitated. "Some people just aren't our target demographic." Jacob's jaw clenched. "And who exactly is? Only people who walk in wearing designer shoes." One of the employees behind Kevin shifted uncomfortably. The tension in the room thickened. Kevin exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been running this store successfully for years. Our sales numbers are solid, so unless you're here to buy something, I don't see the point of this discussion." Jacob studied him for a moment longer. Then, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. He flipped it over, revealing his name in crisp, bold letters. Kevin's eyes flicked to the card. Then, recognition hit. His entire posture changed, his shoulders stiffened, his lips parted slightly, and his confidence faltered for the first time. Jacob didn't give him a chance to recover. "I own this company," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I just watched my store turn paying customers away based on nothing but assumptions." The employees behind Kevin went silent. Kevin's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Jacob cut him off. "Save it. I don't need excuses. I need an explanation." Kevin's jaw tightened. "I was following what I thought was best for the business." Jacob's stare didn't waver. "You thought wrong." He turned his attention to the employees. "How many of you have been told not to waste time on certain customers?" No one spoke at first. Then, one of the younger employees, a woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, hesitated before nodding. "Kevin encourages us to focus on high-ticket sales. He says smaller purchases aren't worth the effort." Jacob shifted his gaze back to Kevin. So, you've built a culture where employees decide who's valuable based on appearances. Kevin exhaled sharply. That's not how I would put it. But that's exactly what's happening, Jacob said. The air in the room was thick with unease. Kevin glanced at the other employees, as if looking for backup. None came. Jacob let the silence stretch. Then he spoke again. Do you know how I built this company? Kevin didn't answer. Jacob's voice was measured but firm. By treating every customer with the same level of respect, whether they're buying a $500 ring or a $10,000 necklace. Kevin's jaw tensed. Jacob continued. I won't have store managers deciding who deserves to shop here, and I certainly won't have employees turning people away because they don't look the part. Kevin exhaled. I was trying to maximize efficiency. Jacob's expression hardened. You were trying to maximize profits by making assumptions about people, and you were wrong. Kevin's shoulders squared. I've increased sales at this location since I took over. That means something. Jacob's eyes stayed locked on his. At what cost? Kevin hesitated. Jacob turned to the employees. From this moment forward, the way this store operates changes. Every customer who walks through those doors will get the same level of service. No more judgments, no more dismissive attitudes. He let the weight of his words settle before glancing back at Kevin. And as for you, you're done here. Kevin's face paled slightly. You're firing me. Jacob nodded, effective immediately. Kevin stiffened. I've put years into running this location. Jacob's tone was unwavering. And in those years, you created an environment that alienated customers. That's not the kind of leadership I need. Kevin's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. He knew there was no point. Jacob turned to the rest of the staff. A new manager will be brought in, but in the meantime, things will change. Treat every customer with respect. That's not a suggestion, it's a requirement. The employees exchanged glances, and a few nodded. Jacob let the silence settle before speaking one last time. I built this company on integrity, and I won't let that be forgotten. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit. He had come undercover to find the truth, and now he was making sure it never happened again. Jacob stepped out of the store, inhaling the crisp evening air. The tension from the confrontation with Kevin still lingered, but there was no time to dwell on it. The real work was just beginning. Before leaving, he had instructed Laura to meet him at the store first thing in the morning. He wanted to ensure the transition was handled properly and that every employee understood the changes coming. The next day, as he arrived, he found Laura already inside, standing near the front counter with a sharp, attentive expression. The employees, now without Kevin's presence looming over them, looked uncertain but aware that things were shifting. Jacob moved through the store with purpose, stopping in front of the employees gathered near the register. Laura remained nearby, letting him take the lead. He addressed them directly. From today forward, this store operates differently, not just in words but in action. He gestured toward the showroom. Every customer who walks in gets treated with the same level of respect, no matter what they're wearing or how much you assume they'll spend. A young woman near the back hesitated before speaking. What if someone really is just browsing? Jacob met her eye. Then you help them. You don't know who they are or what their situation is. That woman yesterday, the one who was ignored, she had the money to buy, and she did. If I hadn't stepped in, we would have lost that sale. Another employee, a man in his late 20s, shifted on his feet. Kevin always focused on big sales. He said smaller purchases weren't worth the time. Jacob's voice remained steady. That mindset ends now. A customer buying a simple silver bracelet today might come back in a year for an engagement ring. If they're treated poorly, they'll never return. Laura stepped in then, reinforcing his point. We're retraining everyone. Customer service, product knowledge, and most importantly, attitude. We're bringing in a new manager, but in the meantime, I'll be overseeing things personally. The employees exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others uncertain. Jacob knew change wouldn't happen overnight, but it had to start somewhere. He motioned for them to follow him toward the break room. Inside, he placed a stack of feedback forms on the table. I want honesty. Write down what you think has been going wrong here. No names, no fear of consequences, just the truth. The employees hesitated at first, but one by one, they took a form and sat down to write. While they completed them, Jacob pulled Laura aside. I want to know if this was just Kevin or if this mindset is in other stores. Laura nodded. I'll do a quiet audit, check recent complaints, talk to staff at other locations. Jacob's mouth set in a firm line. If it's a pattern, we fix it everywhere. Over the next week, changes took shape. Employees were required to engage with every customer equally. Those who had adopted Kevin's dismissive attitude towards certain shoppers were given clear warnings: either adapt to the new culture or find employment elsewhere. The new manager arrived within 2 weeks, a woman named Dana with a reputation for strong leadership and high standards for customer service. Jacob personally met with her before she started, ensuring she understood the problems and how they needed to be addressed. By the end of the month, the difference was noticeable. Customers who had once felt unwelcome now lingered, browsing without the weight of judgment. Sales hadn't dropped, in fact, they had slightly increased. One afternoon, Jacob returned to the store, this time as himself. Employees greeted him with recognition, some with a bit of nervousness, but most with a sense of newfound confidence. As he walked the showroom, he noticed a young woman hesitating by the engagement rings. An employee, the same one who had once been reluctant to engage with lower-budget shoppers, now approached her with a warm smile. Looking for something special, she asked. The young woman nodded. I think so, but I don't know where to start. The employee gestured toward a selection of rings. Let's find something perfect for you. Jacob felt a sense of satisfaction. The store wasn't just different, it was better. He turned to leave, knowing his work wasn't done, but also knowing this was a step in the right direction. Jacob left the store that day knowing the hardest part wasn't the confrontation, it was making sure the changes lasted. Policies could shift, managers could be replaced, but if the culture didn't truly change, it would only be a matter of time before things slipped back into old habits. He spent the next few weeks reviewing reports from Laura's internal audit. Some stores had similar issues, nothing as blatant as Kevin's location, but enough to raise concerns. Sales associates prioritizing high-ticket customers, certain shoppers being subtly discouraged. It wasn't a widespread infection, but it had clearly taken root in more than one place. Jacob decided to extend the retraining company-wide. Every store would go through the same process the employees at Kevin's location had experienced. It wasn't about discipline, it was about resetting expectations. He also made an unannounced visit to another location, this time without the disguise. The moment he stepped inside, he was immediately greeted by an employee. The young man behind the counter smiled, professional but welcoming, and asked if he needed help finding something. Jacob took his time walking the showroom, listening to interactions. Customers were being engaged, regardless of what they were wearing or how much they looked like they could spend. He heard an associate explaining financing options to a couple who seemed hesitant about their budget, guiding them instead of dismissing them. It was progress. A few days later, he called a company-wide meeting. Every store manager, district leader, and senior employee was expected to attend, either in person at headquarters or via video call. He stood at the front of the conference room, scanning the faces in front of him. Some looked eager, some cautious. Change always brought resistance, but he wasn't here to negotiate. He started by laying out the facts: customer complaints, lost sales, the attitudes he had witnessed firsthand. He didn't name Kevin, but those who had been paying attention knew exactly who he was referring to. Then he made it clear. Moving forward, performance wouldn't just be measured in revenue, but in service. Secret shoppers would be implemented across all locations. Promotions wouldn't be based solely on numbers, but on leadership, customer feedback, and team morale. One of the managers shifted in his seat, arms crossed. He wasn't outright defiant, but Jacob could see the skepticism in his posture. He locked eyes with him. "If anyone thinks this is just a temporary adjustment, let me be clear, it's not." The man exhaled through his nose, but gave a small nod. Jacob continued, "I built this company to be more than just another jewelry store. Customers come here because they trust us, and that trust isn't based on the size of their wallets. It's based on how we treat them." He let the words settle before finishing. "This isn't up for debate, it's how we move forward." After the meeting, Laura caught up with him in the hallway. She had a folder under one arm, her expression thoughtful. "You think they got the message?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "They don't have a choice." She handed him the folder. "Customer feedback from the past month, you might want to see this." He flipped it open. There, in black and white, were comments from shoppers across multiple locations. Some were from those who had noticed the changes, praising the improved service, feeling more welcomed. Others were from customers who had experienced the old way of doing things and were surprised by the shift. At the bottom of the report was a note from a familiar name. The older woman from his undercover visit had returned to the store. She had written a glowing review about how the staff treated her with kindness, this time how she no longer felt overlooked. She mentioned that she had told her friends about the change, and they had started shopping there too. Jacob closed the folder. One customer, one experience, but it had set something in motion. He wasn't just fixing a store. He was rebuilding trust.